Wow, you quieted yourselves so nicely. That was a shock. Well, yeah, except that we have a lot of folks. For those of you for whom Leo Beck Temple is not a home game, I want to introduce myself. My name is Ken Chasen. I'm senior rabbi here at Leo Beck Temple. We're delighted to have all of you with us this evening for a really important conversation, one that is even more important at the time that we're holding it than it even was, if that's even possible to imagine, at the time that we first scheduled it, and when many of you I know first registered to participate this evening. I want to express my deep thanks to our friends and partners over at Temple Israel of Hollywood, who are partners in this event, co-sponsors in this event. I know that we have members of Temple Israel of Hollywood who are here with us this evening. We're delighted, of course, to welcome you as well. And then, of course, there are those who are the fans, the network of the Israel Policy Forum. And, of course, our principal thanks to the Israel Policy Forward for making this evening happen. You know, when we scheduled this program, it was, of course, before the war began between Israel and Iran. And along the many avenues of disruption that created for this evening is the most obvious one, which is that our original partners in this conversation, Israeli and Palestinian partners, were unable to travel here. And so it is because of the strength of the IPF network and the deep connections to fellow partners who, as IPF does, value the deep work of pragmatism in searching for solutions, real solutions, peace-driven solutions, solutions that lift up the rights of self-determination of both the Israeli and Palestinian peoples, so that as opposed to getting involved in the false binary of picking a side, we engage ourselves in the holier work of recognizing that self-determination, safety, and peace, all of this is bound up together for these two peoples. And it is the great work of IPF in searching for those pragmatic solutions and in leading the community to understand that pursuit more deeply that this entire evening is about. We're so grateful to have all of you here with us tonight. I want to say, of course, special thanks to David Halpern, the Chief Executive Officer of IPF, who will be moderating tonight's conversation. Again, welcome to you all.
Thank you. Great. Thank you so much, Rabbi, and thank you to Leo Beck Temple, to Temple Israel of Hollywood. It's great to see some familiar faces here, and we are meeting at such a critical and challenging time. I want to first acknowledge, as the rabbi did, that this is a different program, but it's appreciated as in part because of the Israel Policy Forum Network, and it's also because I really nudged Ahmed and Tamar quite a bit, so I appreciate you all joining us. Israel Policy Forum, as was mentioned, we are really about two things. We are about advancing pragmatic policy, something that, today, even talking about what can be done, is an incredible challenge at a moment of unprecedented difficulty in the wider region, but it's incredibly important to ground ourselves in understanding those challenges and to begin to have conversations like these on how you can begin the process of moving forward. So the first thing we're really working on in our work in Washington and in our wider conversations throughout the community is advancing a pragmatic policy and a pragmatic vision for how to move forward. And the second is we talk about elevating the discourse. Our conversations about these issues are incredibly toxic and frankly are in the mud. And we want to be able to showcase a different kind of conversation in our own community and beyond in order to help inform and give the space for the kind of pragmatic policy that needs to be advanced in Washington. That's what this program is all about, and what programs we're doing around the country are all about, really showcasing a dialogue that we're not seeing much of lately. That is Israelis together in dialogue with Palestinians, let alone with our friends from Saudi Arabia, to talk about how this region moves forward. And couldn't be more grateful to our guests for joining us as part of this conversation. As many of you know who are here, this program is also reaching young people throughout North America as part of Israel Policy Forum's IPF Atid program. We will be having a reception for young professionals in our midst afterwards, and I see some of our steering committee members here, and I appreciate everything that you all do here locally in Los Angeles. I want to get straight to our guests. I will lead a conversation, but I think this will be most interesting if you have questions yourself. Rabbi, should people just raise their hand, or do you have? Wonderful. So we'll just do that, but I'll start by asking a few questions, and we'll get right to it, because there is so much to cover. First joining us is Ahmed Al-Khatib. He serves as a resident senior fellow with the Atlantic Council's Middle East programs, where he leads Realign for Palestine, an Atlantic Council project that challenges entrenched narratives in the Israel and Palestine discourse and develops a new policy framework for rejuvenated pro-Palestine advocacy. Ahmed, welcome. We're also joined by Dr. Tamar Hoffnung, who is the Israel Institute Fellow at UCLA's YNS Nazarian Center for Israel Studies and UCLA's Department of Sociology. Her ongoing research focuses on racial and gender equality policies in Israel and the US, with a special emphasis on gender violence and equitable representation. Lastly is Dr. Aziz Al-Gashian, a non-resident fellow at the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington, and a Saudi researcher who comes to us from Riyadh, who is a particularly expert in issues revolving sectarianism, proxies, and desectarianization. He is, as I was joking with Aziz before, he's a bit of a unicorn, a researcher in Saudi Arabia who focuses his research on Saudi-Israel relations and Saudi foreign policy, which is especially unique, and appreciate you making the trip from the region to be with us. Of course, when we thought about this program, we thought about the challenge in Gaza, and of course, everything was upended, as the rabbi noted, when Israel began its preemptive attack against Iranian nuclear program. And that has opened up an entirely new chapter for this region and for the conflicts that were launched on October 7 with Hamas's attack. I want to start, frankly, there and getting perspectives from each of you on the week that we've experienced and what you are seeing, hearing, and feeling. And I want to note that we have an Israeli, Palestinian, Saudi with us. They are not representing their governments or any officialdom. They are here on their own, so we are not getting the definitive sort of government line, I think anything but we have certainly three extraordinary guests to give us their thoughts. Tamar, I want to start with you.
Sure.
The week that was in Israel.
Oh, I didn't see it. My bad.
A conflict 20 years in the making. What have you made of the last week, and what are you seeing? How the Israelis are responding to this moment?
So I think that generally speaking, this has been really in the mic. Okay.
Or you can pull it.
Sorry. So I think that generally speaking, this week has kind of taken a lot of different emotions among the Israeli populace. Obviously, these attacks on Israel that followed Israel's preemptive attack on the Iranian nuclear facilities have hit in ways in which Israel has not been hit before. And especially if until now, if you were kind of in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, major cities, Iron Dome would most likely protect you. As we've seen, that has not been really the case. People have been really, of course, sadly, have died, but also just the damage happening in those major cities. I think every person now kind of knows somebody whose house has been damaged in some way, or that really started hitting home. So it is a perilous moment, but on the other hand, I think that much of the Israeli populace is actually supportive of this preemptive attack. There is a feeling that although this might be scary on the day-to-day, it might actually also bear some hope in terms of changing the Middle East and the powers to be in the Middle East. But of course, that will all depend on what's the exit point, right? Or how this is going to end. Israel so far has done a brilliant military attack, and of course, we know that the intelligence that Israel has is quite remarkable in its way of penetrating the Iranian regime and the way it has carried its attacks. Nonetheless, it's not so clear how, if the program, if the attack, if the goal is going to be met, how it's going to be met, and how we are going to get out of it. The other issue that is looming large is also, of course, what we've seen in Gaza. While also in Gaza, we don't really see an exit plan, and that creates kind of a fear of, is this going to continue and be another attrition war that is adding up, or will the goal of eliminating Iran's nuclear facilities really succeed? The other issue that, of course, keeps people's mind is the mistrust that many of the Israeli populace have with this current government, and specifically the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, where while people are supportive of the preemptive attack on the Iranian nuclear facilities, it's always unclear what are the motives that drive Netanyahu to act when and whether or not these were really this was a very rigorous strategic planning, or to what extent this actually benefited him in other ways. So these are different considerations that I think Israelis are thinking of at this moment. Nonetheless, I think that if we kind of go back to October 7th and the feelings that have taken on October 7th, and the real fear that there's going to that this is going to escalate into a war where Iran and Hezbollah and of course Hamas attacking Israel all at once, and the Houthis, I think that now it feels like this might be actually the right moment. Hezbollah is largely eliminated. Iranians are pretty much, as we see now, even the rockets have dwindled in recent days dramatically. Although we know that there are some capabilities, there are some missiles that could carry up to half a ton of explosives that have not been used yet, so they do still have, but we see that their ability to send these missiles to Israel has dwindled dramatically, and that gives some hope that this actually might have been the right moment where Israel's enemies have, power has dramatically declined. And of course, as everybody knows, it remains to be seen whether or not the US is going to join. There is the question of the nuclear facility in Fordow, and whether or not that Trump is going to carry out an attack as well. So there's a lot of kind of questions about how this is going to go, but I think the large feeling is that once you went on this type of attack, if you must kind of meet your goals, because if Israel doesn't meet its goals at this point, that actually might be the worst outcome that could be from this situation, as it will probably make the Iranians just accelerate their program and give them all the excuse to kind of rush into a nuclear bomb. So I think that that's a lot on people's mind at this point as well.
Aziz, I want to turn to you because Saudi Arabia, I think there is, of course, before October 7th, there was thinking that there could be Israel-Saudi normalization. Now with this attack, we've seen the Saudis come out against Israel's actions. Can you tell us why? What are the Saudi calculations? What are they thinking? What is the broader region thinking about this ongoing war? And what do you hope will be the scenario in the days and weeks to come?
Okay. There we go. Hope is the main word here. We'll focus on.
We're
I promise.
gonna get there.
I promise.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll try to do as much. Firstly, I'd just like to thank Israel Policy Forum for their facilitation of everything. It's a relationship that I'm very proud to have, and a friendship, and that I'm really very much proud to have. And thank you, Rabbi, and thank you everyone for hosting us here in this magnificent place, and I really appreciate this very much. I think when it comes to, you asked about Saudi-Israeli normalization. I wish I had a dollar or a pound, I would say, for every time I heard this, because I get asked this a lot. But I think when it comes to normalization, before those discussions were heating up, there was a Saudi-Iranian normalization in March 2023. And a lot of people were very confused. How would this be? They didn't expect it. I think they didn't expect it because maybe they weren't appreciating how Saudi had to view things and how to treat their main security threat. A lot of the times, I think it's important to too many people are looking at, for example, Saudi Arabia and Iran as major enemies. I think that what Saudi has done is that it changed the frame of the relationship from an enemy to a regional security threat that required to deal with in a particular way. This in itself came also against a backdrop of, quite frankly, a desire to find a new way to deal with Iran, because there was a loss of faith, I would say, in dealing with or having with American partners. At the time, there was Donald Trump in his first administration, and when Saudi facilities were attacked in 2019, there was a very surprising response, which was that His Excellency President Trump said they did not attack the United States. They attacked Saudi Arabia, and if the Saudis want us to protect them, then they better pay. And I think that really took many people by surprise, especially the new generation of leaders. And as a result, this changed the Saudi calculus for the very long run. So the Saudis are thinking very much long term. Yes, there was normalization talks. There was a normalization here. And then it illustrates something, by the way, that normalization with Iran did not negate normalization with Israel and the potential talks of normalization with Israel. And that's what the Saudis are thinking. They're not thinking zero sum when it comes to axes, which is a lot of the times people are trying to impose. I think they're thinking, yes, we could normalize and we could actually restart our relations with everyone in the region. But there had to be outstanding files that must be addressed. And of course, the atrocious attacks on October 7th happened, and that complicated many things. It still wasn't impossible, but I think it made it very difficult when it came to that political calendar and election season. And I think that's when the calculus changed significantly. When it comes to, I think, the Iran-Israel war that we see ourselves in now, Saudi Arabia is very anxious, very, very anxious, because I think it understands the nature of the Iranian security threat, which is that they simply do not want to be caught up in any of this, nor do they want to be targeted at all. So what they're doing is that they have tried to keep themselves away from this. They, as David alluded, they were trying to, they demonized these attacks, these preemptive attacks. They tried to facilitate, use diplomacy, and different forms of multilateral diplomacy and diversifying diplomacy by perhaps offering mediation, trying to speak directly to this. But I think if they were anxious before, I think these discussions of potentially, Donald Trump going to use this bunker buster or whatever the thing is actually adding a lot more anxiety, because I think the Saudis knew the particular perception of how Iran views Saudi Arabia, which is that they do view them wrongly, whether wrongly or rightly, it's neither here or there, but they view Saudi Arabia as an extension of the United States. And And therefore, the Saudis are very keen to discern this perception, to distance themselves gradually. But of course, notwithstanding all the difficulties with the United States or frustrations, it's still their main security partner, and they don't want to lose this relationship. So the Saudis are very much when I used to live in the UK, we're in a pickle. We're in a real, tricky situation that we have to balance. So I think, it's now there's a lot of anxiety. We still don't know. Every day we're waiting. But speaking just to other parts, I think, unfortunately, we're starting to see nightmare scenario after nightmare scenario manifest before our very eyes. And many people have been warning about this. Spillover effect is real. It's not just a theoretical concern. So I'll just leave it at that. And yeah.
So I want to come to Ahmed because I think we're sort of balancing on on two different things. This concept that this is a moment that it brings hope for a transformative Middle East, and this moment that I'm sorry, Aziz, and that this brings
Aziz is anti-hope.
we're not ganging up on Aziz. The idea between hope and just genuine anxiety, right? Yes. That we are faced with one crisis after another with a deeply uncertain future. Yes. Ahmed, where do you sit on this in this spectrum in this moment?
Well, it's an impossible situation to navigate through the black and white prism that people are so used to deploying when thinking about Israel and Palestine, when thinking about the Middle East, when thinking about Iran, Sunni, Shia. Are you with the US? Are you with the Chinese and Russian axis? I mean, truth of the matter is what's happening right now is at a tactical humanitarian level is distracting greatly from what's happening in the Gaza Strip. It is distracting from the horrendous suffering that is taking place. It is, Gaza's no longer hip and cool for a lot of these activists that now found this new cause to oppose the war and start protesting, etc. So that's on one angle, and we have still all the lack of food and water and medical supplies, and the people of Gaza being stuck between a ferocious Israeli war machine and a ruthless, despicable terrorist organization that refuses to compromise, and so they are powerless to stop a war that they did not start themselves. So that's at just a most rudimentary level. And then, as far as how do they view the war against Iran, which is most ironic to see those views and juxtaposition them with how a lot of Westerners are looking at it. So if you're for the Palestinian National Project, if you're in opposition to Hamas, if you're with the Palestinian Authority, if you're for nonviolence, if you're for ending the war, if you're for no more armed resistance that has set our people back by decades and cost us billions of dollars and cost us tens of thousands of Palestinian lives for absolutely nothing, whether you're open about it or whether you're keeping it to yourself, you are delighted to see the Israelis decimate the Iranian regime. And the evidence for that is social media. The evidence of that is my conversations. You go on Telegram channels, you go, and to be clear, this is not to say that the people of Gaza or those aforementioned categories of Palestinians are supporting Netanyahu or are Zionists or are pro-Israel. Far from it. They are furious with the Israeli government that has unleashed hell upon them for the last 20 months. I'm simply saying that there is this unmistakable sense of accountability that they feel finally the Islamic Republic of Iran, the world's most menacing sponsor of terrorism, that used the Palestinian people as a pawn, as a piece on an ever-moving chessboard, is finally being preoccupied with its own affairs. It's finally getting and I'm not saying right or wrong, I'm simply saying finally getting a taste of its own medicine, is finally, this is the same Islamic Republic of Iran that, in a sense, helped occupy the nation of Iraq through its sectarian Shia militias, that helped kill hundreds of thousands of innocent Syrians. The barrel bombs were that al-Assad regime in Syria used. Those were ideas that Qasem Soleimani, the head of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, came up with, that squandered billions of dollars of the Lebanese people's resources and turned the Switzerland of the Middle East into a dump, into a wasteland with inflation, with garbage, with division, all in service and by the way, not to mention that directly sabotaged the Yemeni people's revolution in 2011 that went up against Ali Abdullah Saleh, the corrupt dictator of Yemen at the time, and helped support this despicable, nothing out of nowhere Shia sect of Islam, the Houthis from the mountains, who came in and basically in 2014 took over Yemen and decimated the Yemeni people's righteous revolution. Not to mention the Gaza Strip, where I'm originally from, where I grew up, where my family is from. In the 1990s, I got to experience the Oslo peace process, which meant we all of a sudden had Palestinian passports. We had a short-lived Gaza airport that I flew into twice in '99 and in 2000. We had the Palestinian Airlines. I bet half of you probably didn't know that Gaza had an airport. Can you imagine uttering the words Gaza International Airport right now? And you know, in the 1990s, the Islamic Republic of Iran specifically and deliberately, with documented historical evidence, worked with Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ, to undermine and undercut the fragile yet viable Oslo peace process. Then during the Second Intifada, they helped Hamas weaponize the Second Intifada. They helped Hamas with all sorts of military tactics in the Gaza Strip. Then after the 2005 withdrawal of Israeli settlements, I left the Gaza Strip as a 15-year-old, 1 month before the withdrawal of Israeli settlements. The Islamic Republic of Iran gave Hamas the blueprint for smuggling networks from Western Egypt, from Libya, from Sudan. They were smuggling weapons through Sudan, Port Sudan, and then through corruption in the ranks of Egyptian military and police. They would send it up to the Sinai Peninsula, and after the Arab Spring in 2011 and 2014, Libya, I mean, basically a third of Libya's smuggled stockpiles of weaponry after the fall of the Gaddafi regime. Hamas, for the first time ever, only after the Gaddafi regime fell, they had man-pads, shoulder-launched anti-aircraft rockets that Iran smuggled to Gaza from Libya. My point being is that you take the totality of that, what Iran did at a regional level to the Arab people, and to other Shia, mainly to Sunni nations, but to other Shia populations, to be clear. But they did it in Iraq, they did it in Syria, they did it in Lebanon, they did it in Yemen, they meddled in Sudan, they tried to meddle in Libya, they meddled in the mother of all issues, in the Israel and Palestine conflict in Gaza. But also, I've regularly met with senior US and Palestinian security officials at the very highest levels. And they have discussed and shared the extensive ways since October 7th that Iran is daily, not monthly, not weekly, daily is sending money through Western Union, is sending money through PayPal, is sending money through Venmo in the West Bank to foment a third intifada. What happened in Jenin and Tulkarm and around Nablus and Tobas in northern West Bank, where 45,000 Palestinian people have been displaced because a few guys with M16s and AKs thought they're gonna somehow mount an armed resistance against the IDF. And the IDF came in and wiped out, I mean, I'm not supporting that. What the IDF did was very unjust and was a form of collective punishment. But that was all Katiba 313. It was called the Brigade 313, which is it's a number in Shia Islam. So yes, sorry, I'm giving an abundance of details. I know, David, you wanted a short answer, but the point being is that take the totality of the aforementioned, and you tell someone in Gaza who lost their home, who feels, my mom, who's politically ignorant and knows nothing about politics, when I helped her get out of Gaza after the war, she said to me, she was like, oh my God, they destroyed Gaza for the Islamic Republic. And I was like, Mom, where did that come from? Even the street people right now in Gaza know that yes, Israel has inflicted horrendous suffering upon us, but Hamas and the Islamic Republic at the behest of and on behalf of the Islamic Republic of Iran have handed it us to the most far-right government in Israel's history. So what's happening right now is, and I've been clear on record as stating my ferocious opposition to the government of Benjamin Netanyahu and holding them accountable. But what I would summarize what's happening right now as potentially promising good developments for the region and for the Palestinian people that are very sadly and regrettably happening at the hands of terrible leadership. There could be hope there will never be a steady, prosperous Palestinian state or Gaza Strip or day after with the Islamic Republic in its current shape and format. So does that mean I want regime change? No, that's not my business. That's for the Iranian people to decide. Does that mean I don't have concerns about this cascading out of control? Of course I do. Does that mean that there are all sorts of ways that this could really actually backfire and become yet another entrenched long-term effort that Netanyahu uses for political opportunism? Sure. But do I think getting rid of a nuclear Iran, or getting rid of those capabilities, rather, and clawing back Iran's ability to maintain this network of proxies is a good thing? Absolutely, for the Palestinian people and for the Palestinian national project. And I'll leave you with this. Ismail Haniyeh, who is Hamas's head, who was assassinated in Tehran last year, very shamelessly, before he went on, I forget if it was Al Jazeera or one of those pro-resistance channels. I mean, Al Jazeera is Arabic, at least, is basically Hamas incorporated at this point. So he shamelessly went on and said, they asked him, so why does the Islamic Republic of Iran support Hamas? And he shamelessly said it. Why did it support you in doing October 7th? He said, well, by us fighting the Zionist entity, we are keeping the Zionists busy and away from Iran. Verbatim, fact check me, double check me, triple check me, verbatim. He was like, so we are using the Palestinian people to preoccupy Iran? I'm sorry, last time I checked, my mom and I lost 35 family members of my immediate and extended family members in Israeli bombardment in this war. This thing has turned my life upside down. Gaza's destroyed. I lost both of my childhood homes. Gaza is decimated. I don't remember anybody saying that Gaza should be destroyed so that the mullahs can maintain a nuclear program.
Tamar, two things. One is, Ahmed, you talk about the Palestinian cause being a distraction from Iran, and I think that's right. Tamar mentioned that, it was the decimation of Hezbollah's rocket arsenal as well, frankly, as the Hamas leadership after October 7, which creates the window of opportunity for Israel to take the action that it has in Iran. The question, of course, is not how this has started or what's the reason it started, but where this actually goes. And you mentioned the question of regime change, but Tamar, I wonder if you could speak about what do you see as the Israeli expectation? You talked about the idea that now that we are here, if the danger would be that it wouldn't actually be worth it, essentially, or that it would only be halfway, that it wouldn't actually set Iran back. What do you see as success, and what do you think the Israeli public would view as success in this operation? Is it Fordo or nothing?
So I think this is more complicated. There's a few scenarios that it can go. I think that in terms of the Israeli public and in terms of definitely the defense establishment, if Fordo is not dismantled, and if Iran can recover within a very short time or quite a short time, then basically it becomes a failure. The preemptive attack becomes a failure, because that means that Iran will have all the reason to just leap forward for an atomic bomb. Yes, of course, the attacks have set it back, but from what we know now, and of course there are things that we don't necessarily know, but from the available information at this moment, Fordo is still quite, and the damage is not a damage that will, it will stall the program, but it definitely doesn't decimate the capabilities. So I think in that sense, if Fordo and if the program is not disseminated, then that will be regarded as a failure. Now, in terms of regime change, that is a bit more complicated. As you know, as probably you noted, when the operation started, Hanegbi immediately came out and said that changing the regime is not part of the goals of the operation.
This is Israel's national security advisor.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
But as success continues, so does the appetite. And now we see that kind of different, we see different statements coming out on whether or not, or what are the potential goals of this operation. Although it's unclear, because obviously at the same time that we're seeing things, there's also kind of a psychological lawfare going on. So it's not exactly clear where things are going in that term. I think that when it comes to assassinating Khamenei, that seems not to be desirable. It seems, he is pretty old. There are reports that he might be on opium, that generally he's kind of cloudy, and it wouldn't be a good idea because his successor might be much more capable than he is. So there is a growing kind of notion that perhaps that, although it would obviously be kind of a great symbol in terms of the capabilities, it would not, it could, first of all, it might make him a martyr, which is something that definitely is not in the strategic interest of Israel. And the other thing is that taking him away from the decision-making actually might make Iran more efficient. So that's part of where that comes. So I think at this point, it's not really clear. Another issue to consider, and I know that I need to be short, so I'll try to make it, but another issue to consider is that, I think that part of how things have played is that there was a notion of whether or not the Iranian people, once they saw that kind of the regime is kind of trembling, whether they would go out on the streets and actually follow up or start to do, and we don't see that happening at this moment. If it would have, had it happened, maybe there would have been more of an incentive to really talk seriously about a regime change, but so long as the Iranian people are not really involved, that seems less of an option. But, as President Trump says, we'll see what happens. I mean, it depends on so many other factors.
Yeah. I think it's wild to have this conversation knowing that the next 24 to 72 hours could dramatically change the nature of everything that we're discussing. But I wonder, Aziz, I do want to just, last point on the Iranian issue, because I do want to come back to the story in Gaza that Ahmed began to talk about. But Aziz, if the Americans, what do you make of the American political chatter that you've been witnessing over the last few days, and how it impacts Saudi and Saudi calculations? If the United States participates only in Fordo, what are your concerns in this? What do you think of when you hear about the discourse of regime change? How do the Saudis view all of these this dialogue and this?
I
this
think I share a
conversation?
great deal of Tamara's assessment, because I think the Saudi posture is asking a lot of questions that are not being asked, which is what next? What will happen? Okay, who's ready? Apparently some of the people have thought or assumed that there's going to be, because the unpopularity of the regime in Iran, that people will try to go into the streets and overthrow them. But actually, people have, and this I'm listening to this from Israelis by saying, listen, it's actually having a counterproductive effect. That actually some people are supporting the situation, this notion of Iran, mostly more than regime. So, for me, I think they hear this. We hear this chatter, and something in particular is how can we have an operation without getting bogged down? And I think for Saudis, this is the worst nightmare. This is the last thing they would want. This is exactly why they actually had their own relations with Iran, because what the Saudis don't want, and what they're actually very fatigued of, and they've displayed this historically, is tactical measures while they inherit the strategic ramifications. And by the way, we've seen this also with the Houthis recently. So there was this campaign in March, and many people were like, oh, saddle up, okay, get ready, Saudi better get ready, get your forces ready, and then in a press conference, it was like, I think we stopped. And the British probably didn't even know. The people that were fighting also and bombing Houthi targets didn't even know. And if you ask the Saudis, they're like, we've been here before so many times. One of the things that we've had is, to describe our relationship with the United States is friendship, strategic partnership, a frustration on every side plenty of times. But I think from the Saudi perspective is anxiety also. Is that to what extent will they see things out with us? And that's not what they're saying. So everything they're saying suggests that we're anxious. We don't want to be, as I think both speakers suggested, there is the likelihood that there's going to be ramifications. So, but what is very interesting, and then I'll be quiet. What is very interesting is how many people are speaking very authoritatively about Saudi Arabia, as if they know them very, very well, and they're saying the Saudis are jubilating, and they're flipping, doing somersaults, and they're happy, and they're doing this. And I remember a term that we're using now, a new term is Saudi-splaining. There's a lot of people that are just talking about Saudis, and they're talking about how they're thinking, and they're talking about Saudis to the Saudis, and they're telling them what they're thinking and what they're saying, and this is what you need to be happy about, and this is, yours truly has been the receiving end of many of this many times. But it's interesting to see, I think, this happening, is that many people are talking about Saudi, which makes me very appreciative of this opportunity that you're allowing me to speak here, and you're facilitating these discussions, which a lot of the times are harmonious to what we've all been touching upon. So I have hope written here on capital letters. So I think if we the hope here, you know, we're gonna have to do things differently. But I'll leave that for the next session. But I have it written.
Can I just, in support of what he's saying, and I studied military science and the region's history, et cetera, I think also there's something that many are forgetting, that Saudi Arabia and much of the Gulf in the 1980s endured something called the Tankers War. When the Iran-Iraq war was happening, the Iranians were bombing the crap out of all the oil tankers from Kuwait, some from Saudi. They were mining parts of on a smaller scale, parts of the Strait of Hormuz. And the Saudis, I mean, most of Saudi Arabia's oil facilities are in the eastern part of the country. They're reliant on shipping out of the Strait of Hormuz, which might very well be vulnerable to some kind of Iranian harassment, some kind of a temporary or a partial blockade by the Iranians. They have offshore. We might be, okay, Israel's taken out their ballistic missiles, but they have a lot of cruise missiles. They have a lot of anti-ship capabilities. So the Saudis are right to be also concerned about just their economic lifeline from the experience back in the 80s, an experience that lasted for almost 8 years.
Yeah. And a fun fact, my uncle was one that shot one of them down, actually. He was a fighter pilot then. So,
Shot an Iranian.
One of the Iranian yes, of course. And not one of the oil tankers. The Iranians one. There was I don't know if I have time for a quick one.
But say it in the mic. Say it in the mic.
Yes, a quick one. So I remember I grew up. My uncle was also a fighter pilot, and he was. It was in the 80s, and then I was like, listen, I heard you did something in the 80s. What is this? And that's how I knew about this situation. So there was basically they were protecting. There was something called the Fahad line. There was then King Fahad. It was there, and any kind of aggression or alien kind of airplane
transgression.
Whatever. Yeah, there you go. Would have to be met. So I think they met, and he shot one of them down. And then when they returned back, there were actually other fighter jets coming back. There were 10. And they got this through the information AWACS that they bought from the United States, the US in 1981. And this was then, but then they turned around. So, but it was a genuine, situation. But that's my show and tell for today. That's my show and tell.
Tomorrow, I want to come back to you and Ahmed and start bring us back to where we were a week ago, and that's the situation in Gaza. We had before this this new chapter, this new war that we're experiencing, we were faced with a chapter in Gaza that was highly uncertain, remains still highly uncertain, and certainly no longer is dominating the front pages, has been pushed very further to the back pages. That is, of course, the continued situation of hostages being held, the ongoing negotiations that have failed to reach an ultimate ceasefire, and the beginning of a new humanitarian mechanism that is a subject of a tremendous debate, of course, inside Israel and really internationally on whether it's succeeding or not. I want to get your perspective on this state of the war, and how this war has taken the attention off, of course, of the situation in Gaza, and the sort of sense of where the Israelis see the future in Gaza broadly.
So these are tough questions. I think part of what has been kind of lingering, so as the conflict is going on now with Iran, Israeli newspapers have been reporting on soldiers dying almost every day in Gaza. So it is in a way kind of still on the news in some ways, and of course the hostage families are really concerned for a right reason that this kind of allows Netanyahu to completely abandon the hostages. I think that part of the situation in Gaza is very much, and this would not be very surprising, is very influenced by the political situation that Netanyahu is in within his government, and creating that inability to make an exit plan because of his attempts to preserve his coalition. Now, things changed a bit in terms of Israel domestic politics right before the war. As you know, there was an attempt to topple the government through using the parliamentary means, and that failed, with the ultra-Orthodox eventually supporting the government, giving kind of a lifeline to this government to continue. Now, there were some reports that perhaps they were kind of in the know about what was going on, though it's not clear. But now, kind of the government has more of a, and I'd say this, I'll start this, that, you know, as I started off this conversation saying that it's not always clear, because there are so many different interests all happening at the same time, it's not very clear which one is the driving force, right? Especially when it comes to Netanyahu. It's been, in the last months, it's been very, very difficult for him to keep this government going, especially as it's kind of was reaching a boiling point when it comes to the conscription of the ultra-Orthodox Jews. And the fact that the ultra-Orthodox Jews are not willing to back down, and the public is absolutely not going to accept the fact that they are not going to be enlisted to the army, given the dire need for manpower that is part of. So this has created different also kind of considerations for Netanyahu and his government in terms of if he is able to kind of shape his legacy, which is with Iran that he's been talking for years. Even if the government falls, but he has this win on his belt, he might actually win another election. So that might be motivating him to move forward with this and kind of give him, and kind of take away from the disaster of October 7th that he is so heavily implicated in. And that might be part of the reasons that are pushing. So we have the defense considerations, but obviously this is also something that is looming large in terms of that. And because he is, so the question is to what extent, and of course part of the reason that Israel has not been able to bring on a exit plan from Gaza is because of Smotrich and Ben Gvir, the very radical right, who are hoping to resettle Gaza. Other parts of, and I think generally the Israeli populace is not for that, but because of that, and we see that actually, I see that in my own work when you talk about policy, a lot of times you get these like strange bedfellows, and then you get to this like not, like to the solution that everybody could agree on, right? Instead of going to the optimal solution. And the solution that everybody's agreeing on is that you're not really, you're not declaring a real exit plan, and you're kind of letting things move on. And that kind of seems to be part of that. Because if Netanyahu comes up with a strategic, it might create a situation where his coalition partners are gonna back out. And so I think that also Iran might also change some things in some directions when it comes to Gaza in terms of Israeli domestic politics. First, if Netanyahu is gaining that win and those bonus points that he might think, he might not be so moving so hard in preserving his coalition. He might be willing to have the government dissolve, which is one issue. And also, although today was reported in Haaretz, this also, but you would probably have so much more to say than me, it also might change Hamas's considerations of its ceasefire, although the assessment currently is that if it will take a very long time And that, of course, is going to be bad for the hostages, for the people of Gaza, so I think that there are many things at play at this moment, and it's hard to assess exactly how this conflict with Iran is really going to impact the war in Gaza.
Ahmed, I wonder if you could speak specifically about the humanitarian situation, given that since the breakdown of the ceasefire that had been in place, I believe the ceasefire broke in March. We had a period of time where I think it was 11 weeks where there was no humanitarian assistance going into Gaza. There had been humanitarian assistance that had been built up over the period of the previous ceasefire. But Israel determined that it would not continue with the mechanisms of delivering humanitarian assistance because Hamas was siphoning, stealing, using that aid to enrich itself, to tax essentially Gazans and create revenue streams. A new mechanism was created called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. It appears largely an Israeli construct with American support that has now been operating for just a number of weeks. And it's the subject of considerable controversy, with specific distribution sites being the site or the location of violence, of mass rushes towards aid, of disputed circumstances over how people are being killed in those areas, with Hamas potentially engaging and targeting Palestinians. Israelis have come to argue that this is actually a better mechanism, that Hamas actually targeting these sites is a reflection that it is actually harming Hamas's ability to enrich itself, and yet the aid clearly is not reaching the entire population. I wonder what you make of this debate. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, is it working? What do you make of the current situation in Gaza, and of where we go from here?
Certainly. So it's nearly impossible to isolate the humanitarian conversation from the security issues, from Hamas, from the ceasefire negotiations, and from what the Israeli military is doing. And I am all about compartmentalization, and I believe in that concept, but it really, on this particular subject, it is very difficult. I do want to just the starting point to close the Iran discussion and bring it to where we're at. Do I think that what's happening in Iran right now is somehow going, if you want to think in a conventional manner, you would say yes, it would incentivize Hamas to accelerate the reaching of a deal, to negotiate from a position of realizing that, like, yeah, it's really out of options. But we're not talking about a conventional situation. We're talking about a death cult that literally right before Eid al-Adha, Eid is like when the Hajj season takes place, its leader, Khalil al-Hayya, came out and said, and I learned that this is the same word in Hebrew. I assume there are Hebrew speakers here. He said, our people in Gaza have presented themselves as qurban, as like sacrificial lambs for the Muslim. This, fact check me, double, triple, quadruple check me, okay? I'm not like this. He literally came out and this was his like holiday greetings. This was literally the holiday greetings, is the people of Gaza are sacrificial lambs for the Arab and Muslim nations, and they deserve to be supported. So we're talking about an actual death cult that is ready to go to the very end, like we're talking like the Battle of Berlin bunker moment, whereby, and by the way, there's another ally of Hamas that if that was taken out of the equation, maybe you can have some hope for them thinking rationally, and that's Qatar. That's the state of Qatar in Doha, where a lot of their leadership is, because Hamas has amassed fortunes over the years. Now, are those fortunes making it directly into Gaza? No. I'm simply saying that right now, the state of Qatar is far more consequential to Hamas than Iran. Since October 7th, all Iran could do is basically play with its other proxies or directly attack Israel. So that is to say that, unfortunately, there's not going to be any lahlaha. There's not going to be any serious movement in terms of the ceasefire/hostage deal and negotiations, which is a disaster for the hostages and for the people of Gaza alike. So the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, I mean, it is important to understand part of what got us here, and I wanna say this with a caveat that I have the utmost respect for the humanitarian community and the hard, incredible work they've been doing in impossible situations, impossible environments, in horrendous conditions. And I want to respect the fact that so many of them have paid the ultimate price, so many of their local staff, in providing for the people of Gaza. But I think the confluence, and some people will not like what I have to say, and so be it. Like, people are dying in the thousands, okay? Like, we're past feelings, and I think that we're past, like, touchy-feely, like, sorry, I offended you, trigger warnings, like, I don't care about your feelings. I think the humanitarian community inadvertently contributed to a situation whereby most of the aid, okay, I don't want to quantify it, a significant portion of the aid was in fact being sold on the black market. And there are tiers of aid being sold. Some of it is just literally like, I am a civilian, I just got a bag of flour, but I need some cash, some liquid cash to do something else with it. So I'm gonna go and create they call it a basta, like just a basic table, and I'm just gonna sell some aid. Some other people are a lot more sophisticated and organized in like the black market, like the merchants of death, and this is common in a lot of war zones. Some of it was absolutely organized by Hamas, 100% organized by a network of counting on resale value and counting on taxation as a way to engage in cash collections that they used to pay small, not the entirety of the salaries. See, this is where Israeli, let's call it propaganda sometimes, takes a kernel of truth and makes it into this, like, the Israelis made it seem as if Hamas was like running the World Bank equivalent on all the aid. Like, it was a lot more ragtag in terms of how they taxed this operation. So they would go on BBC, a lot of, like, BBC and CNN and all these humanitarian workers and CEOs. Some of them are my friends. Some of them are my brothers in Gaza right now, running a field work for a major international NGO, a medical NGO. Like, I know a lot of the medical community, the humanitarian community, rather. And they're amazing people. But then they would go on the media, and they would make these declarative statements. No aid is being stolen. No aid is happening. No aid is being siphoned. And it's like an Israeli drone would literally like show, and Palestinians with their cell phones would show like a Hamas truck coming in and like siphoning all this aid, or like this guy going to an UNRWA school, taking all this aid and like at a certain pickup time. So this is part of what got us here, okay? The aid that went in during the 2-month ceasefire earlier this year, I mean, and this is the scandal. And this is why I feel like I have to say this, because no one else is saying it. Because it's scandalous to talk about the scandal. The scandal is that the aid that went in during that 2-month ceasefire could have fed Gaza for like 6 months minimum. Minimum. And it's like, as soon as the Israelis turned off the taps, it's like, nope, we ran out of food, sorry. whoa. Over 1,000 trucks, like just a massive amount of flour, of oil, of the basic necessities. I mean, of course, Gaza has immense needs. I'm just saying, for slowing down the starvation, what happened to all that aid? What happened to the, and then, surprise, surprise, people in northern Gaza, they would be desperate. And then they would break in to World Food Program and UNRWA warehouses and Hamas warehouses and find them full to the brim with food. As those same entities were like, oh, we're out, sorry, we're not gonna do any service. So like, there was definitely corruption, there was definitely collaboration, there was definitely infiltration of the humanitarian community by Hamas operatives, by the black market. And me saying that is not me, of course, somebody's gonna watch the stream and be like, we told you Ahmed is a Zionist, Ahmed is a traitor, he's bought and paid for by the Zionists. It's like, no. Me saying that is a desperate desire to say, like, what went wrong? How are we gonna fix this? How are we gonna learn? We can't just put our head in the sand and blame everything on Israel. So fast forward to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. It is a good concept that is being horribly implemented. It is on paper and in some practice, a fabulous idea. One of the things that was really hard for me the first week to just, because I kept my mouth shut about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and I go on media a lot, I write things a lot, and everyone's asking me for a reaction, like literally The Atlantic right now is asking me for write a piece about the Gaza, but it broke my heart that I saw countless videos of people in Gaza saying, Wallah, this is the first time since the war started we haven't had to pay for food or aid. That was supposed to be for free. Okay, now, that's on one hand, but then let's not kid ourselves. What's happening is you have thousands of people in stampedes, being fired at, being vulnerable. Do I believe that Hamas has every interest in sabotaging the mechanism? You bet I do, absolutely. Do I think there are criminals? Do I think there are thugs? Do I think there are looters with guns? Do I think it's straight up Hamas just shooting at people? I don't know. I have no evidence of this. Do I think Hamas engineers incidents that lead to violence of all sorts? 1,000 trillion gajillion %, absolutely. And that's not my opinion from 10,000 miles away. That's just talking to Gazans, talking to Palestinians, who are like, okay, well, we have the issue with the stampedes or the issues with the, but all of a sudden, a bunch of people start walking in areas that the rest of us, the group, we knew not to go there. Because we knew this is probably heading to some Israeli tanks over there. And then unfortunately, people see others walking, so then you create a herd effect. And then, now, does that then justify the IDF just ripping all those people? And the IDF says, oh, we're doing crowd control, etc. So then the other thing too is, I have spoken just real quickly.
Yeah, I don't want to get coached. Yeah.
You have few distribution centers. They're out in the boondocks. They're in unlit zones, in military zones, close to Israeli tanks, close to confrontation zones. There's rubble. There are no roads to take to them. They're supposed to be open for several hours, but I asked my brother, I asked others. The food runs out within 2 to 3 hours max. And that's why you get this jungle-like scenes of just it feels like Judgment Day. So unfortunately, and some of the organizers, some of the leaders of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation have reached out to me, some of their top leaders, And they're like, Ahmed, please, like, stop saying harsh things about us. Like, we're trying, we're this, we're that. And I'm like, sorry, dude. Like, give me some answers. Like, okay, you had an incident where 100 people were killed on this day. 50 people were killed on this. But at this point, it's every single day people are being killed. That's unacceptable. And so I don't have the answer as to whether it's, I've said, let's do a hybrid approach. Let's do airdrops. Yours truly was big on airdrops before because Hamas can't siphon it all. Let's reactivate maybe some other pathways. Let's actually maybe implement some of they were going to implement some ID checks early on, but then a bunch of leftists were like, this is like Nazi level things, don't check people's IDs and biometrics. And then they backed off. But if they had done that, actually, it doesn't matter how fast you run or how slow you run. It doesn't matter what time of day you run. Every day you show up, here's your ID, boom, we check your ID, you get a packet per day. So there are ways to improve this.
I think that what you're describing, of course, is a kind of survival of the fittest. Whoever's strong can get aid, and whoever's weak does not have the accessibility of aid, not to mention the particular types of aid getting to where it's actually needed versus, as you said, far in fields. But I think the bigger situation is you can come up with whatever biometric scenario you want in the context of an ongoing conflict and an ongoing war. I'm going to be very dubious that any of this is going to be successful without a meaningful ceasefire that takes us beyond the sort of tactical question of airdrops and short-term aid and actually the strategic level of where are we going with Gaza in the future. And I think that conversation has been woefully absent from any discussion for the political reasons that Tamar described, and that discussion is a prerequisite to even begin to think about the Saudi conversation that Aziz has described. Is filled with lots of anxiety internally in Saudi Arabia for all those reasons. We do have a few minutes. I want to take questions from the audience. So if you have a question, perhaps the rabbi will bring over a microphone if you just raise your hand. I see one in
Questions,
the back.
please, not statements, please,
There
for
you
the
go,
interest
Ahmed.
for the interest of time, please.
Actual question.
This is not your first Jewish event.
First of all, thanks. The conversation is really fascinating. What I'm curious about is what kind of reaction is a really scary and is it realistic scenario from Iran vis-a-vis perhaps quickly developing nuclear weapons or dirty bombs or Pakistan getting involved. I know there was a statement that Pakistan had threatened Israel at some point, and I don't know how realistic the spread of nuclear weapons and in the short term and in the medium term and in the long term. I mean, it seems like it's in Iran's best interest to try to develop nuclear weapons as quickly as possible and maybe even deploy them. But I mean, is there any kind of scenario that anyone sees that Pakistan or Iran with a dirty bomb gets involved in that way anytime soon?
Any volunteers?
I'll actually just start by saying Pakistan vehemently denied that report that it will get involved. Like there was a report about Pakistan getting involved with giving Iran air defense missiles. They said absolutely not. Given nukes or being involved, they said absolutely not. So, but yes, there is, I mean, I'll just very briefly say there's a risk that this accelerates that this reinforces rather the notion that look at Saddam Hussein, look at Gaddafi, they were invaded because they didn't have nuclear weapons or they gave up nuclear weapons. Iran almost had one, and if it actually had made a decision to have one, the Israelis wouldn't have dared attack them, especially because they had the delivery vehicles for it. So North Korea is looking at this and saying, you see why we're never gonna give them up? And who knows if this incentivizes some other rogue nations. So there's a question to, more I would say of a political philosophy question as far as like, well, Israel has nuclear weapons. Now we trust Israel's theoretically we trust Israel's judgment.
How do you know?
So like we trust Israel's judgment more than we trust Iran's, but like, but that's I mean, neither here nor there. I think that the people will be chewing up this issue for a while of why you need nuclear weapons as a deterrence, quote unquote.
Great. I want to take as many questions as we can. Maybe we'll take two at a time. We'll do some jumping around to different folks, please. Yes.
This is a question for Ahmed. How did you kind of escape the echo chamber of what I hear about the pro-Palestinian go intifada narrative? Like, how did you get out of that?
And we'll take another one as well. Is that
I guess my question is, as far as getting, if the Iranian regime were to fall, I guess if it were not to fall, would everything get worse too at this point, is my question. Because at this point in time, if they weren't eradicated, how do we let them stay in power? How do you have a ceasefire at this point when the thought that they wouldn't race to a bomb if they stay in power is unimaginable, right? And having them go away means that you could see a situation where maybe the amount of money being put through to terrorists also goes away. So I'm just wondering what the next step is.
I think that's for you, Aziz.
Thank you very much. So I think just to not expand, but to build upon some of what was said, when one is looking at what is happening, probably if we could try to look at it from the Iranian perspective, all their anxieties, all their fears is coming true. They're saying, hey, you see, these people are now attacking us. You see, we needed that deterrence. You see, this is why we needed the bomb. Now, this is, in my opinion, not necessarily a situation that started from the Islamic Revolution or Islamic Republic. This is even something that has its even origins even beforehand. You know, there was something even earlier than this. When we're talking about Iranian meddling in the region, this didn't start in 1979. You know, when we look at UAE, for example, still has islands that the Shah had invaded. Aspects of trying to be even meddle in Arab affairs and trying to be against this traditional ethnic divide. So it's something here, in my opinion, that the regime itself, it's not for me. I mean, if it's not this, it could be something else. As a result of being spooked to this much, because some people feel this was an existential threat that was happening to them right now, and whether they're part of the regime, the Islamic regime, or otherwise. Because I think when one looks at this, also the Islamic regime, or in Iran, it's a fusion of nationalistic discourses with Islamic discourses, with Shiite discourses. It's not just a pure kind of ideological kind of perspective. It's a great, it has a complexity that touches upon different things. So for me, I think what is happening now is something that will speak to not just ideology, but also, as a nationalistic, there's nationalistic resonance to this.
Sure.
I think it's important to also note that, and I totally agree with Aziz, that we need to also kind of distinguish between those discourses, the theological, ideological that drives, and then the strategic considerations, because those don't always align, and sometimes they trump, and very rational decision making. I think that's also true for Hamas, definitely. But I think that as much as after October 7th, there has been a talk about the kind of the fall of the defense conception, Israel's defense conception, and Israel defense about what is going on. The same is happening now for Iran. Iran, for a long time, thought that it could work through its proxies and create a ring of fire, and that will save it the troubles from affecting it directly. And I think that now the tables have turned, and it remains to be seen in what ways this is going to change their conception. But it's clearly that their conception of defense and of treating this whole event has collapsed, and this means that new forms of thinking about this are going to start evolving. And I want to add that, I studied in Mount Scopus, and as you might know, Einstein has all his writings there. And one of his favorite quotes, and I think that that's something that we can also think about, moving forward, is that in the heart of the most difficult moments also lies the opportunity. So as much as this can go wrong in so many ways, it also can provide different opportunities as things are shifting around. And historically, we have seen very dark moments yield opportunities. So I think that's also something to keep in mind.
Right on. And I want to answer your question. I appreciate you bringing it up. I mean, to be perfectly clear and honest and transparent, like, I am very robustly, clearly, and unapologetically pro-Palestine. No, that's fine. No, you don't have to defend yourself. I'm just saying, I identify as such in part to reclaim what it means to be pro-Palestine, because, well, A, to reclaim what it means to be pro-Palestine, but B, because guess what? I actually care about Palestinians. I actually care about Palestinian self-determination, Palestinian statehood. I'm against the military occupation of that, and I delineate the military occupation because occupation means different things to different people nowadays. I'm against the settlement enterprise. I'm against the killing and mistreatment of the Palestinian people. And I also am a believer in radical pragmatism, a rejection of violence, the idea, the concept, the embrace of multiple truths. That's why I started Realign for Palestine, was to create not just infrastructure around me, but a kind of a political vision, if you will, a framework, a scaffolding for like-minded Palestinians. And believe me, there are many like myself, many out there who just, it's either difficult to speak out, in some cases it can be very dangerous. The amount of death threats and threats of physical violence and threats of being beheaded and raped and killed and shot will make the average person lose all form of normalcy. My point is, it can be scary, but for others, it can be more difficult to break away from a sense of enforced cohesion and forced conformity that exists within our community. I've had folks reach out and say, I started speaking out against Hamas, and then I couldn't get play dates for my kids. Or folks that started giving me a stink eye at the local community center. Or at the Arab market, people were like, I saw your posts online, you think it's a good time to stand with the Zionists, and like these very black and white depictions. But I'm gonna go a step further, because I am a bulldozer at this point to survive in what I'm doing. Like, I will oscillate between engage, convince, and confront. And unfortunately, I have to do a lot of confronting, because I would argue that, I mean, the pro-Palestine, what you would traditionally label as the pro-Palestine movement, which is an umbrella term under which you have Arab Americans, Palestinian Americans, Muslim Americans, you have a bunch of leftists, you have a bunch of academics, you have radicals, you have some weird characters that have emerged after October 7th on the right, or people who are grifters, etc. So I would argue that the pro-Palestine movement is in complete free fall and disarray right now. It is within said movement exists mainstream, widespread support for Hamas, for armed resistance. There is very little to almost no recognition that Israel is actually here to stay, that Israel is actually, forget forget Israel's right to safety or security, which I actually believe in. Israelis, Jewish Israelis' right to live in safety and security. I mean, don't forget that, but I'm saying forget that. I'm talking about just them even thinking that Israel is going to continue to exist. Like there's this belief that resistance or somehow through the miracle of time, Israel is just going to vanish.
Algeria.
Yeah, exactly,
Algeria.
exactly.
And many of them don't have skin in the game.
Precisely that. And may I swear this is important, but like just real. No, that's a brilliant point. That's a brilliant point. So recently I did this thing called Jubilee, where I was like, I mean, it's like the surrounded. It was rough. But like I was just like basically surrounded by like 20 pro-Palestine protesters, and I came with grace and patience, and I wanted to meet people where they're at, and I believe in that message, and I stand by my decision to do it. But like out of 20, so it was like, a pragmatic Palestinian versus 20 pro-Palestine protesters. I was like, okay. So out of like the 20, there were like 3 Palestinians in there. And like, with all due respect, and I'm not saying this in like a prejudice, but like I had like Filipinos and Mexicans and a guy from Sierra Leone all like yelling at me and screaming at me like that I'm a Zionist, I'm like, I'm sorry, like what alternate universe did we get to where this is like, and then miraculously they found a guy from Gaza who unfortunately was like, I mean, he's young and impressionable, but he was like pro-resistance and whatever. But that's fine. It's okay, because people change, people go through journeys. I chose the guy, and I was like, I'm so grateful that there's a Gazan here. I can speak to like a Palestinian instead of all these people that are sucking the oxygen out of the room. And they were like so offended. They were like, no, we're giving you oxygen. We're supporting the pro-Palestine narrative. You should be grateful to us. And as you can imagine, I had like choice words. No, I had choice words, but I was very kind and respectful and professional. But I'll leave you with this. This is the big like mic drop moment. The dude afterwards, like I spoke to him and I actually got to hear his story. Because again, like transformation is a journey. It doesn't happen from one Jubilee session. But again, it was a fellow Palestinian. And he made a comment, and this is on camera, so I'm not like I'm not like revealing private. On camera, he was like, and the Israelis can go back to Poland or Ukraine or whatever, And I called him out on it on camera, and I said, that's actually really hateful. And he said, and he didn't get, and everybody in the circle was like, that's not hateful. No, they go back to Poland, Jews. But like I said, no, listen, dude. A lot of Israelis, this is their home. This is what they know. They're not from Poland. They're not from Ukraine. They were born there for like multiple generations. So, and on camera, excuse me, I'm expired at this point. On camera, he goes and he says, that was wrong of me to say. So gotta go watch it. He says, that was wrong of me. I shouldn't have said that. And then I spoke to him afterwards. I have cough drops in here. I'll survive. I spoke to him afterwards, and he said, I swear, dude, there were moments throughout our interaction. And God is my witness. God is my witness. I am saying this for the record. He said, Wallah, you're a Saudi. The Saudis always say Wallah. Wallah. He said to me, there were moments where I agreed with you, and I wanted to share that disagreement, that agreement rather, but I felt pressured, and I felt that I couldn't do it in the group because everyone was projecting onto me that here's another Gazan who's gonna stick it up to this fake Ahmad Zionist Jew bought out guy, whatever. So he was like, people were projecting onto me what it means to be pro-Palestine. So imagine a bunch of we had people with MAGA hats, people with like, swear to God, like make America, like America first, whatever. So we have a bunch of like folks from every continent in the world telling a Gazan how to talk to another Gazan. You tell me that's pro-Palestine. You tell me that's a movement that's gonna go anywhere beyond the dustbins of history. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is to basically rebuild and reclaim what it means to be pro-Palestine, so that two fellow Gazans, we can disagree and take our disagreements offline, but not be told that you need to support October 7th and armed resistance because I, as a guy from Sierra Leone, think so. With all due love and respect to my brothers and sisters from Sierra Leone, for the record, love and respect for them.
We are over time, unfortunately, but I want to thank everyone for coming. Listen, in all seriousness, Ahmed, I think the thing that you're touching on is it's a sad reality of where we're at now, which is that the starting point of the conversation once again needs to be back to the fundamental reality that Israelis and Palestinians are not going anywhere.
Right.
And I think that too often the narratives that have come to dominate our discourse are those that actually believe that they can be displaced, or they will go back to where they came from, or go somewhere else. And I think that so long as the pragmatists among us can talk about the reality that we have to figure out a way forward with Israelis and Palestinians in this land. Sorry, Tamar, you're dying to. Okay, please.
I couldn't agree more with you, and I think that one of the things that these movements, and it's also true for the radical Israeli right, is to prevent dialogue, to prevent conversations, to prevent thinking pragmatically about how we move forward and how both people find a way to live alongside each other in some kind of arrangements, and that's really where the conversation needs to go. And dialogue is so crucial for that. And honestly, I think that's why we both immediately jumped in, because any opportunity for dialogue is so important. And, you know, I'll say just really briefly, I do some research about denial, and specifically about October 7th rape denial. But when it comes to sociology of denial, there's this very interesting research about climate change by sociologist Kari Nogart. And she, you know, that living in denial. And she discusses this phenomena where in Norway, which is, you know, a very left country, and it is very prosperous, and it's very, still there is much denial about climate change. And she tries to figure out what kind of creates that phenomena, that on the one hand, it's a great oil producer, but then it's also, and one of the things that she comes up with, and I'm not gonna talk about the whole book, but this is, I'm gonna make it a very short, is that when people feel this sense of helplessness, that the cause is beyond their control, that they can't do anything about it, they come to, a part of that dissonance creates a situation where the society starts to kind of deny what's going on in order to kind of, you know, come to terms with the situation that they don't feel like they can affect. And I think that in this sense, it's so important for us to understand that we can affect change. We can bring about change. We can accept this reality. And dialogue is a crucial component of thinking about new ways, breaking pathways, and changing the situation that is unbearable for all the people living from the river to the sea. So yeah, that's my.
Yeah, well, thank
From
you.
the river to the sea, only peace will set us free.
Yes.
There you go.
Amen.
There you go. Well, I want to thank you all again. We joked when we were walking in here that, you know, you take a Jew, a Palestinian, a Saudi, enter a taxi, it's like the beginning of a joke. But for tonight, it was the beginning of a very good conversation, and I appreciate it's not a simple or easy or a typical thing to frankly see on the stage these days, and I just appreciate you all being a part of the conversation. And again, thank you so much.
We're so grateful to you all for being here with us tonight. I want to point out that for our young adults who are here, and I really mean this, it's for young adults, not for young adults who are young at heart, like me. Yeah, we who are young at heart are not invited. But those who are in fact young are invited to join us for a special reception afterward. IPF would love to be gathering all of you for continued conversation, for some refreshments. For those of you who are young and are actually going to join us in doing that, join each other, not me, you're going to go out this door that you entered, and before you exit back onto the promenade, go directly to the left. There's a door there for you to enter. Please enjoy. Thank you all for being here tonight, of whatever age you are.